phase of moon. My name's Blake Cousins. In this groundbreaking documentary, we're going to explore alien abduction and strange implants extracted from people from around the world. Dr. Roger Leir has performed 16 surgeries and has removed 17 implants that are extraterrestrial in origin. We'll show you the objects he's removed and reveal why they are described as a smoking gun that prove that visitors from other planets are routinely visiting Earth and keeping tabs on the inhabitants. Also, we'll be speaking to alien abductees and patients of Dr. Roger Leir who've had alien implants removed from their bodies. 15-year-old Jack Graham will be our special correspondent on location in Los Angeles, asking Dr. Roger Leir the questions, if we are alone in the universe. As one of the most eloquent and intelligent investigators of extraterrestrial life, we'll hear Dr. Leir's observations on why the aliens are interested in our planet and what their plan is for the human race.
Now, where in the body do most implants usually come from?
Well, that's an interesting question of where we find them in the body. What we've come to the conclusion is that they have to be in areas that are relatively superficial and near a bone. We've never found one in a body cavity such as the thorax or the abdomen or the brain. Now, we've also come to the conclusion that maybe this is necessary because the electronics of the mechanism, we found that this may be necessary because it's broadcasting a signal. And when you broadcast a signal, at least according to human technology, you have to have an antenna. And what better antenna could be than the skeleton of the body? It contains all the minerals necessary for an antenna. So perhaps that's why they're in such association with bone. The other aspect of it is if you're doing millions of these and you're doing them all over the world, and there's a large number of abductees. The Roper poll in 1993, 1996 said that at least 2% of the American population is involved in alien abduction, and that was a conservative poll because there's a lot of people who are not going to want to answer these questions at all. And then if you multiply that by the world's population, you're talking about a lot of people. So to get remote information as to what is going on within the human body, like we tag bears, we tag porpoises and whales and so on, we can study their habits, how long a bear hibernates, what their metabolism is during the wintertime and so on. Even John Glenn, or an astronaut, complained on national television that he had to swallow implants because mission control had to have that physiological information. Now, one of the things that we haven't talked about at all is why are implants there in the first place?
Now, why exactly do you think that implants are necessary?
Well, I think, again, based on human logic. And let's say, the human race is in a state of infancy, because we haven't been around that long. A race that may be hundreds, thousands, or maybe millions of years older than we are may not use the same logic as we do. So the answer I'm going to give you is based on our human logic. It looks like to me that the entire human race is being genetically re-manipulated again. Because if you look at the children born within the last 60, 75 years, they are not the same human as a person who is my age. In fact, a gentleman by the name of John White, who used to put on UFO conferences in the state of Connecticut, years ago recognized this, and he came up with the term Homo noeticus. Instead of Homo sapien, Homo noeticus, and that means new human. If you listen to what a child has to say today, and ask them or get a feeling for where they get their knowledge from, it's not from a book, it's not from TV, it's not off the computer. They already know it. It's a different kind of human being. So if you're doing a genetic manipulation on a population, you might want to know exactly what's going on genetically without having to abduct the individual again. So you would do it remotely, like as I stated previously, with what we do with lesser animals. Now, would you, for example, reach into the ocean and pull out a fish and tell the fish, I'm going to put a tag on you so I can know what your swimming habits are or what you eat? No, they would just we would pull the fish out, do our thing, put them back. We do it with manatees. I just watched Animal Planet this morning. The manatee doesn't know they have a broadcasting device. We don't explain it to them, that we want to learn about their metabolism and their eating habits and so on. So they just do it. Well, that's, kind of what they're doing with us. They put these devices in so that possibly they can gain remote information without ever having to come back and abduct us again. Now, which is another interesting thing. I've been asked, well, how come I can take them out?
Do aliens want it to be found?
That's a good question. Do aliens want it to be found? And if they didn't, I guess I wouldn't be taking them out. And then I get asked, well, who else is doing this? And as far as I know, I'm the only person in the world. And I did research. Prior to the time I did the first one, even though I thought it was going to be a funny joke, I wanted to see how many implants were taken out previously. And all I did was I read through the UFO literature, and I saw that things were taken out. They turned to powder, they disappear, they dropped, they did this, they did that, but nobody ever came up with anything. And so I do cases, and I come up with actual physical objects that can be sent to material scientific laboratories and get opinions. I mean, I can't explain that. That's strange. And if somebody had told me, 50 years ago, that I would ever be doing anything like this, or would have traveled to 42 countries, or have done the things that I've done, or have done the television programs and radio programs I've done, I would have told them they were nuts.
Now, I know you removed many implants. How similar are the implants to one another? Are they each clones of themselves, or do they vary?
Well, the implants that we have removed in the past, we have about 7 that look exactly the same. And if you lined them all up on gauze sponges, you would never tell one from the other. We have a few that are different, but I have synthetically divided them into 3 categories. Ones that are metallic and covered with a biological coating, ones that are non-metallic, and one that is biological. And each operates a little bit differently. But the 7 that we have that are metallic rods with biological coatings are virtually all the same.
Now, do you personally believe that you've been contacted by aliens?
I would have to say the answer to that is yes. I can tell you an episode that occurred with my family, my daughter and myself, in Laughlin some years ago, which I wrote a book. I wrote a part of a book called Chopped Liver, and we talked about that incident. But during the awards banquet that we were having at the conference, I was asked to come outside with my family. So there was a lot of people who were lined up at the fence along the Colorado River. And we were in back of a lady in a white dress, and I said, what's going on? What's happening here? She said, oh, you missed them. There was about 7 of them out here. And I said, 7 what? She said, 7 craft.
Wow.
And I said, oh, well, I started looking around, and I didn't see anything. And, if you start staring at objects in the heavens, your eye muscles begin to twitch, and I thought, well, these people are having what's called nocturnal nystagmus is the word for it. And then suddenly, like in the movie A Beautiful Mind, where you can look up at the heavens and you can find any geometric concentration of stars that you want to see. There's thousands, millions of them there. You know, so our attention was called to a triangle of stars. Now there was a big, bright, full moon, really bright. And right below the moon was this triangle of stars. And all 40 people seemed to be concentrating on this triangle of stars. And then suddenly the bottom two stars started to move. And they came downward and they went into a pair and they slowly went towards the corona of the moonlight and disappeared. And at the same time, I think everyone there got a telepathic message. Yes, we're here, believe it, bye-bye. And my daughter, who was about 12 years old at the time, said, Dad, are those folks coming back again? So, yes, I believe I have been contacted by non-terrestrial beings.
It's fascinating. Now, what would you say is the most credible argument you've ever heard for abduction?
Well, the most credible argument that I've heard for abduction in the cases that we've done surgery on would be very hard to delineate, because when we set up our set of criteria and protocols, the individual must have some kind of a memory of being associated with the abduction phenomena. When Bob Bigelow or NIDS decided to take on this responsibility of doing the metallurgy, I had to do some studying so that I could just interpret what they had to say. And I started getting reports back, and the first report we got back was they were comparing. This was Los Alamos National Laboratory. They were comparing these to meteorite samples.
Wow.
Well, we know if somebody didn't step on a meteorite or get one whacked through the back of his hand, it wouldn't
So
have
it has to come from outer space.
Had to come from outer space, and they're calling them meteorite samples. So that was rather mind-blowing. So that was the beginning of the scientific aspect. So I figured, well, if we're going to carry on with this, we better set up some scientific protocols and criteria for doing this kind of work. And then we formed our 501c3 nonprofit organization, ANS Research, and no charges were then ever made to any of the surgical candidates.
I see. Now, I know, because you've written a lot of books, clearly, people must have heard about them. How many people ask you, can you inspect me and see if I have any alien implants inside my body? Do you get a lot of emails per day?
Well, I get a tremendous amount of emails, so sometimes 3,500 a day.
Wow.
And yes, we have now instituted a methodology, a scientific methodology, for looking at the possibilities of whether somebody might have an object in their body. And Steve and I both have equipment that we can go, for example, to a conference.
Let's say, tomorrow an alien revealed himself to the general public. How would you say people would react? Would there be mayhem and riots, or how would it go?
Well, if the alien presence were known suddenly, one day, for example, I like to use the example of a huge multi-football field alien craft landing on a busy freeway during rush hour. Would there be a panic? The answer is yes, there would be a panic, because people would be on their cell phones calling Caltrans to see how long they were going to have to sit there before that thing got out of the way so they could go back to get home to watch the Lakers game. But see, it just indicates the quality of life that we have here in the United States. Probably the least important thing of an individual who lives in the United States, at least, is extraterrestrial beings. As long as it doesn't interfere with you personally, then it could be fine, or it could be not fine, or who cares? But because that relationship has been made fun of for so many years, well, we don't even take it, the common person doesn't even take it seriously. So the world is changing, and the world has got to finally know the truth. Government sources and private industry has taken over most of the knowledge of, the extraterrestrial presence.
Yeah. I guess, do you have any good guesses as to why aliens would contact us? What makes us stand out that aliens would want to put their implants inside of us?
Well, I think in order to understand what the alien approach is to human life on Earth, we have to have a good understanding of our history, which we don't and which nobody seems to care about except a few. But if you go back and you look at ancient history and you look at ancient paintings and wood carvings and so on, even liturgical paintings with Jesus, you're going to look up and you're going to see a typical saucer UFO craft flying around, even back in those days. So, we don't know where we came from. We've been looking for the missing link for year after year after year. Where's the missing link? If we look at the writings of Zecharia Sitchin, the late Zecharia Sitchin just passed away, and he wrote a set of books called The Earth Chronicles. And he says that 435,000 years ago, from another planet in our solar system called Nibiru, the group or race of individuals called the Anunnaki came here, and their head geneticist, whose name was Enki, manipulated what was already here into human beings.
Wow.
So if we don't understand the history of where we came from in the first place, how can we possibly understand the present or the future of where we're going with all this?
Jack Graham will now speak to Stephen Colburn, chemist and material scientist, in regards to the implants removed by the alien abductees.
So, can you tell me a bit about yourself and your role within this program?
Yeah, my name's Steve Colburn. I'm a material scientist. I was educated at UCLA, and I work in Camarillo, just a few blocks from where Dr. Lear works. And after we met, we decided to have a collaboration on analyzing these objects more thoroughly. A lot of the objects that we've removed had not been analyzed adequately, so I've done a lot of microscopy and elemental analysis on these objects and come up with some interesting findings. One thing we found out is that the devices are definitely nanotechnological devices. They're not just simply metallic objects that somehow got into the body. They contain carbon nanotube electronics, and carbon nanotubes are the field I'm working in my regular job. And they give off radio signals, and they have odd nanostructures in them made of carbon nanotubes. Carbon nanotube electronics are a hot topic in material science today. By the way, there's many amazing properties about them. The aliens have apparently perfected the technology to use carbon nanotubes in these devices. And there are proprioceptor nerves that go into these the tissue capsule or a gray membrane around these devices. And one of the most fascinating findings was that that these devices contain many of them contain meteoric iron judging from the trace element pattern of gallium, germanium, precious metals like iridium and platinum. And iridium is not found on Earth in any great amounts. And we did the isotopic analysis of various elements from the metallic cores of several of these devices and found out that they were made from off-planet material, extraterrestrial material. There's a certain pattern of isotopes for each element on Earth, and if that pattern is varying by more than 1% or so, then it's the conclusion can be drawn that the material came from off-planet. And some of the isotopic ratios and the elements in these devices are extremely skewed compared to quite unlike the isotopic ratios of elements on Earth. In fact, Dr. Kuntz, our colleague who's also involved in the research, concluded that they probably came from somewhere else in the galaxy. They don't even seem to be from our solar system. These devices have carbon nanotube networks inside the metal. So they're obviously manufactured devices, and they seem to be well beyond the technology of civilian science at this point.
So it's not possible that something like the nanotubes could be made through nature. It has to be manufactured.
No, they were discovered in 1991 in Western science. The Russians discovered them perhaps 10 years before that, but they're not known to be found in nature, and certainly not in meteorites.
So there's no way that it could be faked, really?
No, I don't think so. Some people have argued that these devices could be made by black government projects, but I think that the fact that they contain extraterrestrial material argues strongly against that.
So what you're saying that it was discovered in 1991, right? The nanotubes?
Yeah, and many of these objects
these come before.
Date from well before the discovery of carbon nanotubes in science on Earth. These people reported that these objects were put in like 30, 40 years before a lot of times.
So when you say nanotubes, do you mean that these things could be used to store information, perhaps?
Yeah, they can be made into electronic networks. Carbon nanotubes are let me give you a little bit of background. Graphite is a hexagonal array of carbon atoms, and these layers are stacked. If you take one of these layers, one of these hexagonal arrays of carbon atoms, and roll it up into a tube, that's a carbon nanotube. And there's various types of carbon nanotubes with different numbers of walls. Single wall are the most studied right now, and these contain single wall carbon nanotubes. Single wall carbon nanotubes are often less than a nanometer in diameter. These are small diameter single wall carbon nanotubes that are in these devices, and those can be used as electronics because there are metallic and semiconducting single wall carbon nanotubes.
So you're saying this is very tightly stacked, and if you took out you laid it end to end, it would definitely be a lot larger than it would. So all this information is tightly stored together, compacted?
Yeah, I would think so, yeah. The total length of the carbon nanotubes in one of these things might be several miles. I haven't figured it out, but it's got to be a lot.
So the technology used to compact that much information so tightly seems to be pretty futuristic.
Definitely. I don't understand how the metal could actually be put around the carbon nanotubes without destroying the nanotubes, because the melting point of these metals is like 1500 degrees Celsius, and if you poured molten metal over the carbon nanotubes, it would just destroy them or convert them to metal carbides.
So would it be possible to say that the information required to make one of these carbon nanotubes isn't readily available on Earth? It must have come from somewhere else?
We can make carbon nanotubes, but to make a 3D intricate composite like this with carbon nanotube electronics inside the metal, that's well beyond our technology at this point. We've speculated that they might be physiological monitoring devices or listening devices. They're definitely relaying information about the subject to the aliens through radio signals. They're not always transmitting, so...
Have you noticed actual radio signals emitting from it?
We've detected radio signals coming from them, and in two of my reports we outlined some of the frequencies that they give off. The last two devices we detected radio signals from.
Are they common radio signals that are found on Earth?
Some of them are aeronautical and satellite communication frequencies, but there's also a very high frequency microwave discharges as well.
So could it be possibly dangerous to have a lot of microwaves emitting from inside a person?
I wouldn't say it's a lot of microwaves. We've only detected perhaps milliwatt levels of power, but it's hard to say. There's been no ill effects noted from anybody having these devices inside them.
What about after the surgery?
In fact, they don't have any rejection or immune response by the body.
So that it's possible to not even notice these tiny things in your body?
Yeah, most people don't notice them at all.
So would it be fair to say
that they see them on an X-ray?
Would it be fair to say that there might be a lot of those in a lot of different type of people?
Oh, that's very safe to say.
Wow.
Some of the frequencies that we've been able to gain some knowledge of from classified information is that they are deep space, fixed or mobile deep space frequencies. And that presents quite a conundrum because what advanced civilization would be using a radio wave to begin with?
So do you think it would be possible that the government could know about these nanotube technologies?
I think they know about them. I don't think they can reproduce it as yet. It's anybody's guess how much technology the Black Project community has. Some of their stuff is reverse engineered alien technology, reportedly.
So would it be possible to take this apart and perhaps learn the secrets of what's inside it, and perhaps use it for our own technology?
That's what we'd like to do at some point. We'd like to take one of these devices and mount it vertically on a scanning electron microscope mount, and take an elemental map of one layer of the object, then etch away a layer with a beam of fast atoms, and then do the next layer and get a three-dimensional structure of the object that way.
How strong is the object? Is it easy to break?
This one, I don't know. I haven't had to cut it yet. Most of them are fairly easy to break. I've cut 4 so far, and 3 of them are fairly easy to break. One was immensely strong and could not be cut at all. With even diamond tools wouldn't scratch it. It appeared to be some kind of highly advanced iron metal matrix composite with carbon nanotubes.
You mentioned there was a sort of biological capsule that surrounded it. Would that be used to protect it, to prevent it breakage?
No, I don't think it's to protect it. I think it's to organize the neural input to the device somehow.
Is that if we were able to back engineer some of the technology that we have in these devices, we could prevent, for example, inflammatory processes and rejection. In other words, if we could make something similar, you could wrap a heart, a kidney, a screw, a pin, or wherever in it, instill it into the human body, and the person would not have to take any anti-rejection medication for the rest of their life. So that this was presented in a report, which is in the White House, that I have a copy of from the OSTP. That's the Office of Scientific Technology and Policy, and that was handed to Obama at the time when he was trying to raise money for his medical health care problem to get Congress to approve the money.
Will President Obama, with the help of Congress, fund this medical research and reverse engineer these implants? If so, the implications could help medical technology beyond our imagination. Now, we go to the most incredible account of alien abduction explained by Dr. Roger Lear to Jack Graham.
3 young children, about 9 or 10 years of age, who lived in Tennessee. And they decided to go out on a little local camping trip. So not too many blocks away, it was kind of like an empty field and so on. So they packed their primitive sort of gear, which was blankets and things of that nature, and things to cook over a fire, marshmallows and so on. And they went out, and they didn't even have a tent. They used sticks. They gathered sticks and they put the blanket over the sticks to act as a tent. And they roasted their marshmallows and told jokes and so on. Well, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, they noticed that there was a very bright star up ahead, above them. And the 3 of them all concentrated on this star because it was so bright. And the 3 of them watched as this star descended closer and closer and closer. And as it got closer, they saw that it was a craft. The next thing that happened was that when the craft was about 50 feet over their heads, a beam of bluish-white light in a cone came down over the 3 of them, and they began to levitate up in this cone of light. Now, if someone had done that to me at my age, I'd have a little bit of trepidation because, if you're going up, and a cone of light, the first thing that would come to my mind would be the fear of falling back down. There's nothing holding you. But they had the absolute opposite feeling. Oh, wow, this is fun. We're having fun. We're going up in this light. So they get up into the craft, and then they're in a round room that kind of looks like a hangar. And there are typical bumper sticker gray beings that are there. And so they say, what's happening? man, what's going on? I said, have no fear. You're going to be returned. You'll be fine. We're just going to, take a look at you folks for a few minutes and so on. But their fear was in being separated. Greater fear for each other than for each as an individual. Then when they finally were separated, they were taken down different corridors that went off this room. And under hypnotic regression is when they described what they saw off the corridors, which were rooms that looked like hospital rooms. And the one that we went through most of the hypnotic regression was placed in a room unclothed and placed on a table that he couldn't tell whether it was jutting out of the wall or whether it was on a pedestal. And although he thought it was metallic, it was neither hot nor cold. It was very form-fitting. But then an instrument was used that he described that actually put the implant in his wrist. And when he did this, he didn't feel too much of anything. But if he got nervous and so on, always one of the gray beings would come very close to him, and with their black eyes, they would get very close and look into their eyes, and this aura of calmness would come over them. Once this was done, they were examined and taken out, and the three kids were back together again in this large hangar-like room. And the next thing they remember, they're lying back on the campsite again, and the craft is slowly moving up, and bang, it was gone. So they didn't know what to think, whether they had a nightmare or something happened, or just didn't understand the entire situation. One of the things that makes this case so unusual is that all three kids did something very strange after that, like a suggestion was put in their heads or whatever, but they actually stole into this person's backyard that had a vegetable garden, and they tore up the vegetables and ate them. And that's one of the most unusual cases that I've heard of yet. So they must have been told to do this for some reason. Because some folks that are involved in the abduction phenomena come back with symptoms. They feel muscle aches, pain, fatigue, feelings of the flu, dehydration, and so on. But the three kids, in asking them questions, of course they weren't kids when we did the surgery, but in asking them, if they had any ill effects from it, they don't recall anything. So maybe what they got out of the vegetables was something that obliterated the symptoms that abductees have.
Now, what procedures and protocols do you follow for the surgery?
Well, the procedures and protocols that we follow have to be kept 100% in order to make this a scientific study, because we try and stay with the scientific method. One of the things we do is when a patient contacts me, they have to convince me that they have an object. And that's either through an X-ray or a CAT scan. We don't accept MRIs because MRIs can produce false positives for foreign objects. For example, in an MRI, if you're looking through a slice right through the top of a blood vessel and there's blood flowing through a vessel, you'll see a nice bright spot. But that's not a foreign object. All it is a cut through a blood vessel. So if they send me X-rays or a CAT scan, then I take them to the radiologist and I get it confirmed that this is a foreign body, and what his guesstimation of the material is. Is it more dense than the surrounding bone? Is it less dense than the surrounding bone? We know if it's more dense than the surrounding bone, it's probably on the metallic side. Also, we have other consultants that we use. For example, we've had a couple of cases that were dental cases, and these were dental x-rays. So we have dental experts that go ahead and will look at the x-rays, and then one will make suggestions as to whether they need further films, a Panorex or a CAT scan. So once it's been established that there is an object there, then the next thing we do is we send that client a package of questions, and they have to answer all the questions. There are no right and there are no wrong answers, but it gives us a complete background of what the possibility of their actually being involved with the abduction program is. Also, one of the forms amongst this questionnaire is a gradable form on probabilities. So if they're over 35% probable, then they've been involved. Now, lots of people step on things. Lots of people have, they want 2 seconds of fame on television or to get filmed. There's a lot of reasons for people that contact me. They may be not abductees at all. Some abductees don't get along well with the problems. And as the late John Mack wrote in his book, there are 7 traumas that are involved with alien abduction, and only one of them is the event itself. Another one is, who are you going to tell? Who's going to believe you? So you have this argument that goes on continuously. So a lot of these people are not well adjusted. A lot of abductees have problems. They can become alcoholics, drug addicts. They can be confined in mental institutions. So you have to sift out these people to become part of the study, and this is one of the first things we do. Then once they are accepted as a possible surgical candidate, do they want the surgery? Do they want it removed? And if so, if they agree that they do want it removed, they have to understand that the product that we're going to remove becomes the ownership becomes part of ANS research, and that we promise to give to the rest of the world as scientific knowledge. And if they're not willing to do that, then we don't accept them as a patient. So if we look at statistical numbers, let's say 10% out of 100 might be a true surgical candidate. 1% of them will only be ones that will operate on.
Now, have any scientists tried to talk to you and give possible explanations for what it is instead of aliens, and try to prove you wrong?
When I talk to the academic scientific community, they're also interested in the analysis and the intrigue of what they're looking at on a scientific academic basis. That they don't even offer a lot of times suggestions. If we do it and they're being paid, for example, for a television program, they'll actually get them to lie on camera. Also, scientists, by and large, are prey to higher masters, as other people, in other fields of occupations do. They have to earn their paycheck. They have to feed their families. So, and they could be threatened. They can be threatened by any agency of the government, for example. Not so much anymore, but in earlier years, yes.
To what extent do you think is the government hiding information from us? Do you think they know? Do you think they have contact with aliens?
I think that the government historically has made contact with aliens, and there's most probably been deals that have been made. We have enough witnesses now, for example, Holloman Air Force situation in which at Holloman Air Force Base, where Air Force One was seen to land, the base was literally frozen. No one could move from their post when this was going on. There was lots of witnesses to things that were happening. 2 electricians, up on a pole were told to stay there and not move till all this was over, and that was near the runway. Then they saw 3 circular craft come flying overhead. One of them began to hover over the runway when Air Force One stopped. Another one took off and went 20 miles away and hovered over a park. And the third one was somewhere else lingering around. And it was said by the lineman, who had a good view of this whole thing, that Eisenhower President Eisenhower at the time, got out of that plane, walked over to the craft. They saw a ramp come down. He walked up the ramp and shook hands with some kind of a non-human being. Went in, was there for about 20 minutes, came back out again. The alien craft took off. Air Force One took off. And instead of following the rules and regs that they had set up for landings at that base, they took off and flew directly within 50 feet off the roof of the hospital.
Jeez.
So this has been, cited as one of the examples, but certain presidents were in the know, certain presidents were not probably in the know. And today, I believe that the situation is totally different. I believe that most of this information today is in the hands of the giant monarchs of industry, these multi-lateral companies that are, some of them are part of the military-industrial complex, and some of them are industry itself. And it's the greed that keeps propelling this on and on and on. But it looks like they're getting to the point now where they're starting to eat each other, because I guarantee you that Standard Oil, with its concentration on fossil fuel energy, is not really interested in what Monsanto is doing, making GMO foods. And Monsanto, with GMO foods, is not really interested in a free energy system that somebody else might develop. So things are changing rapidly, and of course with the citizen hearing that's going to be held at the end of the month in Washington, D.C., and it will be streamed out to the world. We expect half the population of the world to watch this congressional hearing, and hope that the government will actually start releasing information.
With trillions of planets in the universe, it's hard to believe that planet Earth is unique. Odds are that life exists elsewhere. And while life on some planets may be less advanced than us, chances are that more advanced life forms will also exist. So the question becomes, will these advanced life forms have the ability to travel to Earth? And, if so, secretly tag us with extraterrestrial hardware during their visits? Prior to interviewing Dr. Lear, I might have said no. But while I still have my doubts, Dr. Lear makes a fascinating case for this, and now I'd like to know more.
Jack, in his quest for the answer, has reached out to Third Phase of Moon to speak with the alien abductees who've had implants removed by Dr. Roger Lear. We have provided him the contact information. Mary, who wants to remain anonymous, and Tim Cullen have come forward to speak with Jack and answer his questions in regards to their alien abduction and the implants removed by Dr. Roger Lear.
Hi, I'm Jack. Tell me about your abduction.
I have had my family, it runs in my family. My brother has had experiences. His family, since the marriage, has had experiences. My husband underwent experiences, as did I, from being married into my family. It seems like that was the protocol for marrying into the family. And because I had unusual experiences from the time I was really, really small, and my brother too from the time he was an infant. And I believe they started with my mom and dad, because my dad had had some sightings. I had had a sighting. My mother had a sighting of a UFO over our home. It ran in the family, and there were a lot of experiences that my husband and I had in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. And he would actually get night terrors, which we thought were from, he was a Vietnam veteran, had experiences in Vietnam, and thought it was post-traumatic stress syndrome. It turns out it wasn't from Vietnam. He actually then started remembering in the early 90s that the night terrors he was experiencing was from these creatures being in our home and taking us at night.
What was your reaction when you realized you had been abducted by extraterrestrials?
Let's see, it was removed in 1996, probably about 6 months to a year sooner. Before that, I realized I had a scoop mark on my leg, And I did not know there was an implant in there. Had no idea. I just saw this scar on my leg and on my left calf. And when Roger was, I was assistant section director and then section director of MUFON for Ventura, Santa Barbara counties, and Roger was helping me, and he had arranged to do surgeries, and he had gotten funding through Bigelow, and for 3 surgeries, we had 3 people that were going to have supposed implants removed. Roger had gone through the X-ray process and exam process. Well, one of them was Whitley Strieber. He had an object in his ear, and he was to be one of our guest speakers and then go ahead and have a surgery. Last minute, he decided against having the object removed from his ear, and it's on the outside of his ear. He still has it today. It's under the skin on the back of the ear. And he decided against it. Well, we had funding for 3 surgeries, and Roger was, Dr. Lear was beside himself as to, what was he going to do? And I said, well, you can remove this scar off my leg, whatever it is. I don't know how I got it, but make that the 3rd surgery. And he said, that's fine. He says, but we have to go through the examination process. We'll need to get x-rays, blood tests, which we did. And on the x-ray, surprising both to myself and him, he saw an object on the x-ray that was just under the scar, the scoop mark I had. And that's how we discovered that there was actually an object under the scoop mark.
What was your reaction to the news that aliens had implanted a device in you?
I was shocked that there was anything under that scoop mark to begin with. I didn't know how I obtained that mark, but it was an unusual mark, and it seemed to just appear. At least I just noticed it. I think he was shocked because that was the first time he had ever had a scoop mark with an object under it. So he was shocked. I was shocked. And I kept trying to, rationalize that, maybe I just got something in my leg. And after it was, extracted and examined, it was nothing. I kept saying, are you sure this wouldn't be found in a regular body? Is there any way? And he goes, no, Alice. This would not be found in your leg. It could not, it would not be there naturally by any means. It wasn't a calcification or anything like that. It had a lot of unusual characteristics, and he's since then done some more surgeries that have had the same type of object.
Is there anything else you want to add?
Well, I think he's doing something that is so important, and he helps so many people, and he never asks for anything, in return from anybody that he tries to help. He's just, he's doing it because he has not only the ability to do it, but he has the need to find out what is really going on, the curiosity as to what's going on. It's affected him. Everything he does, his life, his career, he's very dedicated to trying to find out, what these objects are. And also, with these objects, we're finding that they have no inflammatory response around the object. Could this technology help the medical profession now in dealing with transplants, where these people with transplants have to be on horrific medications for many, many years, where if this technology could be developed where there would be no rejection. I mean, it would be wonderful for the people that have to go through this with the transplants. So, I mean, he's doing it for a lot of reasons, but he does it. It's a labor of love for him and curiosity. And he feels very dedicated to trying to help people, because a lot of people, with these type of situations, they just don't know who to turn to or what to do. Unfortunately, he's there to try to help.
Where was your chip implanted?
The implant was it was located in my left wrist area, arm wrist area, almost identical to the 15th surgery Dr. Lear done on Ron Noel. His implant is the same shape as mine, a cantaloupe seed type object, and located in basically the left wrist area. In fact, we kind of wonder if we could almost put the x-rays over each other and they'd almost be in the same spot.
Did it hurt after the surgery?
Yeah, when they got a hold of the object, it felt, I felt it a lot of pressure and uncomfortable with my arm. Like it was, got chicken winged, and I kind of had to carry it in a sling for a little while, but then it calmed down. It really, like I said, it was just like it was just being, the arm was being abused. I realized this thing was hooked to my nervous system because when I became aware of it, it was like it was aware of me and I was aware of it.
The link between the implants and the abductees themselves are questions we may never know. But the real question here is, are we alone? And the answer is, these implants are extraterrestrial in origin, thanks to young Jack Graham asking the questions and Dr. Roger Lear's answers. We are not alone in the universe. My name's Blake Cousins, and we'll see you again next time.
Third phase of moon. Third phase of moon.